Before I do introductions, I will just firstly ask anybody in the audience who has ever interacted or engaged with an AI tool of some sort. Right.
Yeah.
Who's confidently able to put their hand up and say they have no idea what they were doing on it? Right. You look in?
Even better.
Yeah? Okay, this is good.
Experimentation.
Right. So morning, we welcome you all to our AI panel talk. We have two very good experts with us today. We are lucky to explore this practical conversation about the future, about the present of AI, interacting with design, the industry, some of the terminology, how we position now, where it's going to go to in the future, and really wanted to have a soft conversation and practical engagement with you and the experts on where AI sits. I'm going to do this a little bit differently today. I'm going to really lean on you guys a lot during the process, just because I don't want you to sit there and take in all the information and then have a lot more questions than answers. I'd prefer if you walked away with answers and less questions today. So there'll be a few more pauses and questions just to get your feedback. So don't be shy. And yeah, no further ado, we've got a Google AI architect, Lucrezia, thank you for joining us. And we have Hamza from Gensler, who's very experienced within architecture, workflows, the design, the industry. We'll give you the opportunity to warm yourselves up to the audience with a soft introduction. If you just want to tell us about your day-to-day, how you work with AI, what it means to you, and we'll go from there.
Amazing.
Yeah, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's super exciting to be here. Actually, I don't know if we talked about it, but I was studying design in high school.
Oh, nice.
And then my life took a turn. I was an exchange student in the States, in Tennessee. And I don't know how, but there I was like, no, now I want to study, economics and management and finance. So that's what I did. And then I landed in data.
Okay.
But it's interesting because I did start at the beginning of my career. I thought I would actually be a designer.
Okay, nice. Good. That's good influence.
But yeah, so apart from that, what I do now as an AI architect at Google, I work with clients, customers of any kind really, companies in any sector, any size, startups, large organizations. And what I do is I help them understand how to leverage AI, mostly to innovate. Right now, we're still at the stage where companies are thinking, how can I innovate within my sector? How can I even disrupt my market? Leveraging AI. So that's what I do on a daily basis. I have conversations around, where is it that companies want to go? What's their goal? What's their mission? And how can AI be an enabler for them to reach their goals?
Nice. Yeah, beautiful. That's a good platform. Hamza, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, amazing. Happy Tuesday.
I suppose a bit of background by me. So I'm technically a digital artist and architect, but really my role is to work with Gensler's global design technology arm. Gensler, if you don't know, is a world-leading design firm. We work across many different design practices, from interiors to product to architecture to cities to branding. And so really design is really the underlying ethos for everything we do. And my work has been working with, I would say, quite an elite team in the industry of innovators looking to sort of create design technology tools and to work with design technology workflows that amplify and innovate the design process. So with AI, of course, I've been working to look at what we call a hybrid process, which means really embedding human analog creativity at the core of using and being augmented with AI tools. And my day-to-day, I suppose, is, there's many things, but the key things would be upskilling the firm. So we're creating programs to essentially teach the entire firm of designers how to employ some of the most cutting-edge AI tools, specifically in image generation at the moment, but really our scope as design technology extends far beyond just image generation and visualization. It's, you know, BIM technology, it's sustainability metrics, and you name it. But then also I work on key projects as well.
Nice, beautiful. So if we segue straight into what AI is, there's going to be a lot of terminology expressed today that you may have no idea what you're talking about. Fear not, you're in safe hands. We will digest that and extrapolate that. But if we just think about sort of trends, AI trends, let's get that out the way, because that's probably one of the most curiosity-driven topics. What are we talking when we think AI trends within the marketplace, specific to design, technology? You've probably got very diversely different but relevant answers. So anyone who wants to take a start with that, you're welcome.
Maybe meta trends with you, with Google.
I'll start with like more generic trends that I see across industries, and I mean we can dive deeper into the design creative space. So trends, as I'm sure you know, the AI models that we work with at the moment called LLMs, so large language models, they are massively big, like billions of parameters. Parameters is basically how the model functions and how it learns. And they are very, very big models. They cost a lot to train, and they need a very peculiar infrastructure, which is also why we got to LLMs only now. Like in the past few years, we were able to run them at scale, which is something that, 10 years ago, we already had the building blocks, but we couldn't run them at scale so much because we didn't have the hardware, right? So these LLMs are very big, very expensive, very powerful. And I think one of the trends, though, is how can we distill them down? So make them a bit smaller, make them a bit leaner. And we will see this both in terms of models that are as powerful as their bigger versions. So can you take a very big model, reduce the number of parameters, but doing it in a way that the model is actually still very performant for the task at hand? So that's the leaner side of models. And then I also think we will start seeing models on devices. So models that work on edge, that work on a phone or on a watch. So this is very interesting because it opens up, a lot of opportunities when you can have a model that is super powerful but runs on a device and can give you immediate answers. So that's one of the trends. The other interesting one is about agents, what we call agents and agentic frameworks. So if you think of a model like Gemini, it's our family of large language models within Google. The most basic usage of that is that you ask it a question, it gives you an answer, and the answer it gives is based on the training data that it has seen at training time, right? And these models have been trained on billions and billions of data, and that's why they are so smart, let's say. Agents are models that actually interact with other systems. So imagine right now you ask Gemini a question, it gives you an answer. That's it. You use your answer to do other things clearly, so it's very helpful in that sense. But agents would mean you can actually ask it to do something for you. For example, based on the question you gave me, send an email or add something to my calendar, add a memo, interact with all of the other tools that you would use on your day-to-day basis. So this idea of agents, actually, it's the real augmentation of, it's no longer just something that we brainstorm with. For example, that's how I use LLMs a lot. It's like I use it to brainstorm ideas, to search for things within a repository of knowledge, a knowledge repo. And the next step is really, now that you gave me an answer, I actually want to do something about it. Send an email to my colleague, remind me to do this later on. So yeah, I think these two, there are many more, but these two, I think, are very interesting and worth thinking about.
Yeah, I love that. Sort of setting the bigger picture there. And many of that actually is already touching the design industry. But really, I think if you think about it this way, I like to kind of set the timer for most people to have kind of been exposed to AI is when ChatGPT launched, or when they saw DALL-E or Midjourney image generation tools. And really, I think that has that sort of set the timeline for people to go, oh, like, oh, AI is really a thing and it's really here. But as we know, AI has been around for arguably decades, and really it's because of the consumer level kind of impact that ChatGPT had. We really saw it take hold of the world and everyone's attention. So in the design world, I would almost bifurcate. There's two real interesting applications, and one which is getting both are getting a lot of attention, but one definitely seems to be having a lot more, you could say, aggressive development, a lot more, there's a lot more development going on, and that is in image generation technology. Now you have image generation technology, but you also have, as Lucrezia pointed out there, with LLM technology, right? Which is, so think of it simply, creating images or creating text. Creating text is insane because that's information and knowledge, and so you can create knowledge, and that's another crazy thing, because if you think about what ideation means, ideation as designers, and there's a lot of designers in this room and maybe listening, but ideation is the ability to come up with novel ideas, right? And we haven't really seen that being possible before generative AI. But now you're in a position where ideas can be generated that are somewhat external to you, but still there's a level of integrated to what you wanted it to do in the first place. So there's this massive almost tension of agency. Like, if we use this tool, do the ideas really belong to us? Can we really claim agency over that? And so image generation tools are really interesting as well, because as designers, we're visually minded. And when you want to come up with a concept, you can now simply type that in, or what Gensler is really has really been pushing is what we call the hybrid process, where it's not just about typing stuff in and getting outcomes, but it's about, one, creating and using a tool that we've embedded information into and we can have a lot more control over. But what happens if the AI process starts with a human sketch, or starts with a human collage or a model or information? So that idea of integrating human workflows within the AI process is certainly what we're interested in when it comes to generative AI, or one aspect of generative AI. But obviously, productivity tools are really being craved for in the industry, and things that just make organization easier.
Is there a creative change within Gensler on the process? Integrating with AI, or is it still early days?
So we were very we were early adopters, you could say, and early experimenting, certainly industry wide, I would say. Mm-hmm. And that's allowed us to be proactive now, because as it's no longer a trend, as this new era kind of deepens, and our people becoming more and more cognizant of the importance of integrating AI in an intentional way, we had already taken some very key steps. And people have asked me, like, why images? What AI can do so much far more than, what about data rich? Look, ultimately, data is the key to everything in a sense, sure, in one way. And we certainly, we have a very robust strategy when it comes to data implementation and strategy, and that will definitely form the basis of how these tools evolve and how we implement them in intentional ways. But really, if you think about it, with the power of designs being generated in a visually powerful image with image generation tools, with that power put in everyone's hands, which it is, it kind of raises a bit of a question of, well, what then gives us as designers a unique edge, right? If everyone and anyone can create these beautiful designs that are that have been sourced from all across the world, like, how do we use it intentionally? I think so. That's why we paid a lot of close attention to using this in a very intentional way. Okay. And so we have already made a lot of. I would say we're the furthest in the industry.
Okay, nice. Is there anyone in the audience who has a question regarding sort of development or trends within AI? Like, just super curious as to a certain type of product. Yeah,
This may be very naive. I don't know much about the subject, but so we have a lot of focus on the image generation and the visual-minded stuff. Has there been development in, say, like space planning, like iterations of kind of those early space plans where you're, doing 5 or 6 different options, and that, I think coming up with a foundation of a space plan, just like with the image generation, is something that I would love to see and adopt and use. Just wondering what the news is on that.
Yeah. So I don't want to name any softwares, but there are loads out there. And there are plenty that start to work. The thing is, they kind of work right now at a relatively simplistic level, where they can generate like a 2D house, a 3D house plan, right? And some of them tap into furniture repositories, and they can put the right furniture in certain place. But it is really early days when it comes to generative AI being able to do 3D, what I would call kind of data-rich generative 3D. Kind of work, and that's really, honestly, it's because and Lucrezia talked about the fact that hardware really was the trigger to why AI has kind of reached new frontiers, and especially with 2D image generation. NVIDIA, I've named a company, but NVIDIA, everyone knows them. NVIDIA would help because of the leaps and bounds they've made with GPU power. We've really now been able to tap into tools that can do these incredibly fast and powerful inferencing processes. So to inference 2D information was previously very difficult because it required so much GPU power, right? As well as the algorithms that have been researched and developed. When it comes to 3D data, it's another, maybe, I don't want to say a number, but it's a multi-factor, increase in the level of GPU required to do that. So the answer is, yes, there are tools that do it very simplistically, but to do it in a way where it's really complex, 3D, data-rich generative outcomes, which is what designers really want. You don't just want... I'll give you one quick example before I hand over. There is currently an experimental tool which can transform an image, say of this jug, into a 3D jug, right? It requires my 4000 series NVIDIA graphics card. It requires you to download models that are hundreds of gigabytes onto my computer. And it's a revolutionary thing. But the fidelity of that jug is not perfect in any way. It's kind of this mesh model, and it has so many imperfections. It's not data rich. You can't segment some of those, the leaf. And right, what designers want to do is create kind of information technology with these 3D assets, not just some sort of net mesh thing. But the reason it's generating such a kind of crude model in that sense is that the data set that it's been trained on are rubber ducks, children's toys. And that's where we are. We're at that stage.
Nice. Any other questions? No? So if we move into the practical sort of AI implementation side, you'll be exposed to a lot of rapidly evolving technology. Companies who are looking to get into the AI game, talk us through how the roadmap looks on integration. How do we integrate it? How are you advising companies get started with it? Just give us the basics, as in, I think we're all pretty curious as to how do we start with AI? Where should we start? Is that even the right question? Yeah, take us on a journey. Where do we go? How?
Sure. That's a great question. So there is a framework that I've been iterating upon through my work with customers. And yeah, I wrote a couple of things about that. So that's really what I'd share with you. And then you can find some assets. I can send them over to do the exercise yourself. So if we think about the opportunities that AI unlocks, it's a journey, right? So there are many colors and many different options. But I think there are two extremes. On one hand, you have, how does AI help you on a day-to-day? Like, how does it improve your productivity for tasks that are specific to you? So I'll give you an example. For me, I use AI to read big amounts of information. Like on a daily basis, I might want to read research papers that have come out. and they are hundreds of pages, or, research in general. That's what I use, and it makes me much more productive, because before, when I didn't have LLMs and this kind of AI, I wouldn't have the time to read 3 research papers a day, right? So that's on a personal scale. The other extreme is, can you use AI to create something novel that hasn't been done before, right? So if you're familiar with the term foundational models, right? Foundational models are models that have a very broad knowledge, and they were basically trained to solve a specific task or a number of tasks. Like, they were trained to do Q&A, or even to take that one step further, they were trained to know a lot about a specific topic, for example, healthcare or the legal sector, or you name it, right? So between the two, it's really a journey, and there are steps to be taken. I would say if you start with productivity tools for yourself, the step after that would be, what can you do at a team level? So no longer just you, but you and your team. And the step after that would be maybe a team that you're not familiar with, as in, let's think about for a healthcare firm, and that's something that I've been discussing with a couple of different clients. You might have the IT team that are the ones responsible for developing AI tools. They are developing for the biologists, right? So there's a gap between the skills that the IT team has, which is like, they understand AI and models and all of these, and the biologists who are like, okay, we understand molecules and genes, and what we're interested in is, how do we develop the next drug to cure a certain disease, right? So bridging that gap is really, I think, where the magic happens. And the suggestion there is, in my opinion, for cross-functional teams to come together and, first of all, ask themselves, what are we solving for? So like in the creative process, in the ideation process, what are you solving for is still, it's as important as it always was. So sometimes in other panels, I got a question from the audience, which was like, what's the coolest application of AI? And I was like, well, it depends. Like, what's your mission? What's your goal? And I think that's still the starting point. So the work that I do with the companies that I work with is, what's your company's goal? What's the goal for your team? What problem are you trying to solve? What are the pain points that you think AI could potentially solve? And then from there, start looking at, what tools do we have at the moment? What capabilities exist in the realm of AI that you can use to solve for those specific problems? So that's kind of the journey. I would say where to start. Start using AI in your day-to-day, because like LLMs make it incredibly easy now. You don't need to know how to program. You don't need to be an expert, because you can converse in natural language. And this was the big breakthrough. Now you can query a data set that previously you would need to program in SQL, for example, to extract data from a table. And now you can have an interface where you're like, how much did I sell of this book last month in this specific region? And behind the scenes, the AI does that translation for you, but you're interacting in natural language. So start from your daily productivity, and then in that journey, keep on focusing on what is that you're solving for. And I think that would make it much easier for you to basically combine the technical capabilities of AI with, what you're trying to solve.
Yeah, when it's tackling it from a practical point of view, we're probably really exposed to anything on social media, the next AI tool that does this, that, and the next thing. And I think it's overwhelming when you look at that and you're like, oh, but I can do this and I can do that. You can all of a sudden do anything, nearly. But it's a good grounding question to start with. What are you trying to solve? What are you trying to do? And single out the objective.
Yeah.
So that's really good. I like that. It gives you that clarity, because I think you're exposed to quite a lot now. A colleague will come into you and ask you about whatever AI tool they've just downloaded or they've been exposed to in a talk like today. And you're like, okay, well, I'll just stop what I'm doing and do that. So I think it's very, very important just to focus on what you're trying to achieve and, in a way, stick to your lane. So that's really good. Do you find any sort of design considerations that we need to be thinking about when applying?
100%. And just to add one layer to that amazing answer there from Lucrezia is, maybe this is a bit of a cheat code, but if you're thinking about how to use AI and implement it, I think my personal advice would also be, think about what you already do and what the magic is of that. You as a human and you as your analog workflows, right? If it's a public speaking thing, right? Think about the fact that you want to use this tool to augment what you already do. And really, the reason I say that is because you're going to go down the line of thinking of really cool AI applications, but you will eventually come to that point where you'll say, well, wait a minute, like this is distancing itself from what we really actually want to do. And I think that's the beauty of that answer, is when you can anchor it in what you want to do and what you already do, I should say, you're setting yourself up for what we call the hybrid process, which, to be simplified, is, you know, we're moving towards a world where AI technology is integrated in everyday life, already is becoming. And really what will make you stand out is how it already empowers what you do as a human. For the design industry, really, I think that's what gave us kind of an edge as Gensler, because, like I said to you, like design technology is vast, and you know what we do as a design technology and a design firm to build a better world extends from all sorts of technological applications. But within this small and growing area of generative AI, really the biggest consideration was, how can everyday designers in our company, and we have incredible designers who, as I said, work across all different scales, how can they continue to do what they do, but they're empowered by these tools in a way that doesn't conflict with what they want to do, it doesn't necessarily disrupt too much what they want to do, but it expands what they want to do. And we've come up with this, you could think of this analogy of the process. And I was saying to Lucrezia before this, it's not necessarily the proprietary tools that we're developing around models, and I'd love to pick your brains on foundational models, because I think we're moving. People will be questioning those a lot more in the near future. But it's not necessarily the tool, but it's the workflows and the way that people use those tools. And really, the more nuance you can embed in that, I would argue, the better. And so, how can everyone use these tools in a way that augments what they want to do? That has been the front and center consideration. And the way we think that we're going to push forward to that is looking at the creative process has always worked in this way of things start really crazy and expansive and messy, and then it slowly moves to more refined thinking and then solution, right? So we found that AI can work really well and naturally in that process, especially if that expansion phase or that brainstorming or creative ideation phase, if that's being powered with AI tools, then it's not this, it's more like, whoa, like maybe in like 5 dimensions, and that will continue to expand. But really, we felt if we can get hold of how do we continue to have a creative process, but one that still puts the human at the center, then we're setting ourselves up for a future of creativity that is incredibly natural and profound into the power of what we want to do for design.
100%. Is there anyone who's working with an AI tool that is looking for more guidance on it? Do you currently work with a tool that you're like, oh, well, we're looking to integrate this with a team, and we're not quite sure if it's the right tool? It's just, is there anyone using a tool at the moment that they're curious about? It's not about anything more than just exposing a few names, a few apps, a few ideas, what someone else is doing within the industry. You all raised your hand. You're all basically using AI, but yeah, here we go.
I thought I raised my hand. I've used it very little because I
Cool.
feel like I've failed at the first hurdle.
Okay.
But what you mentioned about reading research papers is probably something that lots of people in this room have do is reading sustainability pieces based on maybe tender responses that come from architects, and a lot of the tenders, a lot of the sustainability certification out there is vast, and it applies to lots of different materials and an entire building, that sometimes you only need the answers for a particular piece of furniture or for architects particular piece of cladding. So it's very specific things from a large piece of text. And I thought I downloaded a few things and tried to sort of train an AI model to only find pieces about specific pieces of furniture. Same with the kind of UN sustainability goals, that sort of thing. It's vast, it has lots of different elements, but to try and extract certain information. And I got to the point where I couldn't really trust it, so I kept having to read it anyway. So I kind of gave up. But I know it's in there somewhere, but I was wondering if you had any kind of, what specifically, I wasn't using the Google one, for example. This was on ChatGPT. I've now got Gemini, but I don't really know how to use it, so maybe that's better.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think something very important that is still very important, central to these models, is how you prompt them. So how do you ask the question? So there is a whole kind of field called prompt engineering, and it's all about like, how do you actually ask the question? There are strategies around asking the question, and at a very high level, it's like being precise. You can also ask, like, act as if you were an expert in this or that. Like, there are a lot of small things that you can put into your prompt that actually will get a much more specific answer. And the interesting thing of prompt engineering is also that it differs for different models. So you cannot not use the same strategies at the moment for Gemini and a different type of model. They would have their own peculiarities, and that's because of how they were trained. So prompt engineering, and I think that's, for example, at Google, that's where we are focusing on. For a lot of these use cases, we would say to our customers, don't go down the fine-tuning route unless you really, really need it. So first, like, try out and make your prompts much more specific by studying what does that specific model expect you to ask, how should the question be posed, basically. And then only after you've tried prompt engineering, then go down the route of fine-tuning. Why? Because fine-tuning is complex and is expensive, right? So we do think that we are approaching a future where prompt engineering should be enough for you to get the information that you want out of the model, and you won't have to rely so much on fine-tuning. Clearly, then, there are some use cases where the topic that you are studying is very, very niche, and that's when you would consider fine-tuning. The other interesting angle is what we call RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is basically a way in which you ground your model. And for this, I will call out a tool that probably you already know. It's called NotebookLM. It's a tool that we've launched a while back. I did a couple of demos that are quite impressive. If I could demo, I would show it to you. But the beauty of that tool is that basically it does that grounding for you on your data. So you are still using Gemini as like the brain behind the system, but you're also giving the tool your data. And behind the scenes, what this model does is it takes the brain of Gemini, but it specifies the answer on the data that you've given it. And that's kind of, to oversimplify, that's what grounding means. Because these models come with a knowledge that's all the data that they've seen when they were trained, but then you can also force them to specifically look at the information that you're giving it. And that grounding process is really core to all of the applications that we are seeing. I don't think there's any organization that went live with an AI project that hasn't done grounding in a way or another, because really that's an important step. Like, the competitive edge of you using AI, it's really to ground the AI that has its own generic knowledge, but on your specific data, because that's the knowledge that you have that your competitors might not have.
Sure.
So hopefully that helps. Try out NotebookLM, give it the papers, ask the questions, read also a bit around prompt engineering. And I think those should already get you to a better result than what you got so far.
Yeah. RAG is great. And I think I'll just quickly add, NVIDIA. RTX RAG, they have something you can deploy in your own computer, which is like, you know, it's the reason I mention it is because it's more open source. Obviously, you know, yours might be great too, but it's open source and it can use a multitude of different LLM models in the back, but does, like, the way I would say it in lay terms is it's like Control F on steroids.
Nice. You don't hear that every day. Control F on steroids. Wow, you got to capture on that. That's nice. I like it. Right, if we move into something that's a little bit controversial, is human AI collaboration or argument. I don't know, probably mixed emotions on how humans and AI are meant to interact. Raise your hand if you thought AI for any second of its life was going to potentially take your job, or you thought about, could AI replace me as a job function? Yeah, scary, isn't it? So if we talk about how humans and AI and the collaboration or argument, let's leave that as a question, looks with the rapidly evolving industry, how do we see AI as a bolt-on positive tool opposed to a negative, this is taking my job? Or are we wrong and it is taking our jobs and we need to know about it now? Because, yeah, we don't know.
So I think, and this is connected to something that maybe we won't touch upon, so AGI.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's open it up, whatever that is.
Artificial general intelligence. So there is a debate in our field around whether these AIs can become smart enough to actually be general intelligences, right?
AGI was what again?
Artificial general intelligence. And everyone has their own definition, right? Which is part of why this is such a contested topic. But there are many people in the field that do think, and basically all the labs are basically betting on the fact that we can create an AI that is intelligent enough to really be generic and be able to solve for any kind of problem and answer any kind of question. So for those who do believe that AGI is a thing, yeah, I mean, I think it would be easier to think an AGI, because it's generic, it's powerful, it's kind of like a human, and so it could take over everything that I do. I personally don't believe that that is the case. I mean, even when we started having neural networks, which is kind of like the predecessor of all the models that we're talking about now, the neural networks were created to mimic the functioning of our brain, of a human brain. But it's an oversimplified model, right? Like any other model, it kind of mimics, it takes inspiration from how we work, but it's not exactly the same. And we also, the same way that we don't fully understand the complexity of our own brain, we also don't fully understand what happens within the layers of this neural network, right? We are trying to make it explainable. We always try to make these models explainable, but the reality of it is that there are things that happen that are unexpected. So having said that, I don't think that AIs will substitute us, but that's my personal opinion. There are many other people that do think that they will become as powerful as a human. I think, how do we make sure that we don't lose our jobs to AIs is to use AI, use it as much as possible. Understand also what parts of your daily job could potentially be substituted and completely automated away by an AI, because that's not where the real value of you as a human is, right? Anything that can be automated away is not probably your competitive edge and where you should focus on. So I think the closer you get to AI, the better you will understand what can be automated away, and in time, what will be automated away through AI systems, which will also inform you on what are the things that AI is still not good at, and you are. And those are really the ones where you should double down. So it is, as he was mentioning before, a hybrid process whereby there are things that will be slowly automated away, but there will be more and more opportunities also opening up, right? So as for any other technology, technologies have been taking over and removing some of the things that we were doing historically, and we started doing other things and evolving ourselves and our capabilities towards things where technology still couldn't help us.
Sure.
So I think that's what the journey will look like. And I do think that the most important thing is that we all, irrespective of whether we are technicians or not at all, the beauty of having some LLMs and AIs that we can interact so easily with is that we can stay close and understand really what they do and what they don't do, even if all you know is natural language, any language really.
Sure.
And that's a key difference from other technologies that we would have before, that not everyone could have access to them or even understand how they worked. Whereas I think now with LLMs, because you can interact in natural language, it also means that you can be a non-expert in that technology, but you can still understand what it does and what it doesn't do for you.
Yeah, sure. How would we keep our skills relevant then?
Well, I think, look, to the point previously, people are very concerned about automation. I am too as a creative. But really, most things, even in the current context of the AI tools out there, they are semi-automated. They are tools that they still require your input. And I think if you look at that, that's a simplified way of saying this hybrid process, right? But the level at which you semi-automate, the level at which you integrate, I think that's where the richness and the value lies in our future value propositions. You know, when we're sitting with our future clients and people, and we say, look, we use AI, but we use it like this. I think that's really the key. And you finding what that is for you is the power. And I think you look at a simple example, right? Like previously people, before, let's say, audio and visual technology, people would be playing instruments and finding a way to record that and then manually, you know, I'm probably butchering this, sorry, sound guy, you know, and they put it together with these manual means. But now we have maybe a percussion deck DJ thing that you can essentially have the power of a full band. But has that meant that people playing instruments manually has gone out of fashion or they've lost their jobs? No, it's a different thing. And I think in the same way we could look at our creative futures, that yes, there are you know, drawing and putting pen to paper and coming up with human design ideas will never go out of fashion. In fact, I would say it's what's going to empower the future technological workflows themselves, the same way you have to have an understanding of musical craft and instruments to be able to, you know, even produce on the digital level. And what's amazing is, you know, when you go to those more technologically oriented craft-based tools, or I would actually argue that we're moving towards a new craft, and even at Gensler, the tools that we're working with, we have very precise control about, we can literally dial up the amount, the AI inputs. And think of an example of an image, right? If I do a sketch of an interior of this room, and I upload that sketch into say our tool, and then I can start to dial up the amount that the AI wants to flex that sketch. It starts to infer materials, references, some of our past work all onto that. Right? And then there's this amazing process, how I talked about the messy process and expansion. What I didn't mention was actually when we get to this point, it's a slightly different version of that tool where it's all about control, right? And that control aspect would say, actually, I see these lines in this sketch. And again, because of these new AI algorithms, can actually detect line work on a sketch. You can detect a perceived depth of an image. And then you start to infer upon that. And by the way, the reason I'm so excited about image generation is because I really see and feel it's a precursor to moving from 2D to 3D. And when we get to a world where it's generative 3D information, then it's real, I think, real disruption.
Disruption as in people are losing their jobs, disruption?
No.
I think you might have scared a lot of people.
Well, look, that question gets put out a lot. But just analyze precedent. It's never really been, we've seen technological revolution, it's never really been full-scale jobs lost. It's been just rethinking the job market itself. It's actually arguably going to create more jobs and new jobs. And you will have to just generally upskill yourself to do the job that you currently do. And we're seeing that on the ground, for example, at Gensler is, we're working very hard to upskill thousands of people in our firm with knowledge on cutting edge tools and workflows. They haven't lost their jobs.
So how do we give the greater community some sort of toolkit, starter guide on how to upskill themselves? I mean, this is probably something they could take away and apply in the next week. What are we thinking as a toolkit of, well, how do we get started upskilling? Because that's obviously the key. If it's gonna be with us for the foreseeable future, which we know, how do we bolt it on as well, this is me plus AI, and we're taking on the world, opposed to AI is just taking over me?
I think if you're an organization versus if you're an individual, there's going to be different considerations, of course. From an organizational standpoint, I would say you need to come up with an approach and a strategy. And that comes from what Lucrezia was talking about before, is what is your why? What is your why? What is the intent behind using these tools? You could argue it's almost impossible that there's a future in which you wouldn't need to consider using AI in some way or another. You might, I mean, it's coming to your iPhones and the iPhone 16. So like, can you avoid it? I don't know. So asking yourself that question now is probably a good idea of what is the intentional hybrid approach that I can take. Once you have that, then what will start to become very obvious is what type of AI solutions are you going to be looking at? What type of AI solutions are you going to be considering to augment what you already do? Once you figure out what those types are, you go and upskill in those particular AI deployment strategies. You might speak to some experts on scaling that if you're an organization. If you're an individual, you need to experiment like crazy. I would say I'm a prolific experimentation obsessed person. So for me, it's always about, if I see something that is new, I want to fully understand it and see whether it has application. I think maintaining that level of curiosity is really the key.
Yeah, to give some certainty just on that, would Google's roadmap of the future have less staff and more AI assistants? Is that too early to say? How does it look from Google's point of view? And if it's something you can't really get into, then that's fair enough. But got to ask.
So before going there, I wanted to slightly disagree with that it's different for organizations and individuals. Because I actually see, basically, if you use AI as an individual, there's no reason why your team within your organization should adopt it. So, for example, if as an individual you start using NotebookLM to read your research papers and you find out that it actually does a very good job at grounding that answer and finding the specific detail that you were looking for, then very likely all of the people in your team within your organization would see some value from that. So I think it's actually a very small step between using it for yourself and then presenting it internally to people within your organization that have similar needs and interests to yours. I think, again, this is such a peculiar feature of this technology whereby you can test things out so easily. You don't need to know what happens behind the scenes. Of course, if you're serious about using it, you should read and listen to how does an LLM work behind the scenes, right? Like, what does hallucination mean? Hallucination is when these models give you an answer that seems like true. If you read it, it makes sense, but it's not. That's an hallucination. It's basically a mistake that the model makes, right? So if you're serious about using it, you should familiarize yourself with these things. But in terms of testing, I think it's so much easier to test these kinds of technologies than it was to test any other kinds of technologies, like think mainframes or even a smartphone, actually. Like I think about my grandparents and trying to convince them to use a smartphone and how hard that was. Whereas when I told to my parents, take this thing, ask it whatever you want, that was so easy, right? It's the first time that this happens, and that's the amazing thing about this technology specifically. So I think on one hand, if it works for you, it very likely works for your organization. And that makes it easier to try things out on your daily basis in your personal time, and then say, because it worked for me for research, for example, it probably will help the whole team. Maybe in the design space, it's not as easy, but I think, for daily productivity and anything that has to do with absorbing knowledge and asking questions and going through large corpuses of data and information, that is very much the case. So on one hand, there's that. To your question around what are we doing at Google. So if you're users of the Workspaces suite, so Gmail, Slides, the spreadsheets within our Workspaces, documents, all of that, Geminis or LLMs have already been instilled into all of that. So right now, if you go to Google Slides, you can have Gemini generate an image for you. You can have it generate a slide. If you have a slide deck that is already been prepared with your knowledge of a specific topic, you can say, generate an introductory slide, and Gemini will create for you a slide, like it will physically add a slide to your slide deck. It will summarize all the content that you already had in the deck and be like, okay, these are the highlights of what we will talk about today, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will also generate an image that it feels makes sense and fits the context of the rest of the slide. So our AI is already instilled in everything that we do. That Google Slides is an example, but you can also now, you have it in Gmail, so you would have this, it looks like a star almost on the top right-hand side. And if you click there, you can ask things like summarize the emails from yesterday. It's smart enough that you can say, summarize emails from my boss. I've tried it out once. Like I literally said, summarize the emails from my boss. And it understood who was my boss, even though I never mentioned the name. Okay. So these are ways in which, if you're in the Google Suite, you can see and try out, this technology, and it's really instilled in everything that you were doing before. Right? Before you were probably filtering the emails from your boss and then you were going through them, and now you just have a tool that can do that for you. So kind of like the journey hasn't changed, and I very much agree with what you were saying about the creativity. You start brainstorming and then you distill things down. The process is the same. This kind of technology is just making it easier and faster for you to get to the answer and go through the journey that you would have gone through anyway. So that's how I see it.
Less of a threat, more of a tool.
Definitely.
Yeah, fair enough.
And just a quick point on the individual organization difference. To just provide some clarity, what I mean by that is, as an individual, if you're just experimenting with your fictional ideas and whatnot, you using consumer-based tools is not really going to be an issue, and actually will help you understand the wider market and what's possible. But as an organization, we felt it's very important, because when you're working with clients and confidential projects, there's going to be a whole other consideration to the way you experiment. So that's all I meant.
Yeah, fine, fair enough. I think that gives us all an idea on a base and a foundation on where it is and how it looks for the future. With it rapidly evolving, in 6 months from now, it'll probably be all outdated and in a different direction in somewhat of a reality check. What we want to do is just ask you, when you started half an hour, 45 minutes ago, you were uncertain about maybe a few elements of AI. Do you feel more comfortable with AI as how it sits in the workplace? Or do you have growing questions now? And if you have growing questions, just raise your hands. That's perfectly fine. Do you feel more comfortable? Raise your hands. Partially, yeah, okay. So it's going to leave us with a lot more work to keep the conversation going. What can we give them? What can we give everybody as an honest, here's a bit of really good, fruity takeaway on AI. We want you to embrace it, enjoy it, make fireworks out of it, kind of thing. Is there anything we can give them to just give them and the rest of the community a better confidence boost? Just like get involved. There's a lot of curiosity and there's a lot of anxiety. How do we just give them positivity? Anything.
So for me, like if I think about my career and how I got into data, I've always worked in data, right? But I studied design first at high school, and then graduated in finance. And only after that, I started working in data, and I built my whole career on data. And I think my competitive edge has always been that I would look at information, you know, if it was research paper or a book or an article or a podcast, a video, whatever. And I would find something that piqued my eye and interest and curiosity and thought, okay, that's interesting. There's something in there. That's how I got into AI in the first place. I saw AI for the first time when I did an internship here in London. I was still studying. And back there, this company was trying to create 3D models of garments, pieces of garments, so that people could try on clothes online. That was kind of their value proposition. And that was probably around 10 years ago. So it was very, very cutting edge back then. They were among the first people trying to do that. So I saw that and I was like, there's something in this. I want to enter into the, back then, big data analytics space, right? And that's how I started. And then how did I upskill myself, given that I haven't studied computer science, but I was working as a data scientist. That was my first job. So I was reading a lot of papers, and I was going to my coworkers, founder of the company, and asking him questions, asking them a lot of questions, right? And that's how I built my knowledge and kept my competitive edge, you know. It was always like that. I would read and be exposed to a lot of information, and I would pick something. It was maybe like a gut feeling, but I would be like, there's something there. And I would follow that lead, and that would take me to the next step in my career. And the reason why I'm saying that is because how I did it until now was I would read the papers. I would ask the question to a person. I would look at the video or listen to the podcast. And now I can do that multiplied by 100 times, because it's not going to be a paper per week, which is probably what I had time to do before when I had to do it. Now it can be 10 papers a day, right? So, you know, what I'm trying to push to you is that in my case, but I think in the majority of cases, your competitive edge as a person is your creativity and your ideas. And because these LLMs, this kind of AI, can help you go through so much more information that you were ever able to do, you know, it can only get you better, because it will accelerate that process of finding an idea that is interesting for you. It would accelerate how you do research on a specific idea, and also will augment the sources that you can use to ask questions and clarify ideas for yourself. So, you know, back then I could ask the founder of my company and his co-founder, 2 people. Now I can have however many sources, and I can ask as if I had, you know, 100 experts that sit on a pile of knowledge, and I can ask to all of them whenever I want. Even if I wake up at 4 a.m. and have a question, I can do that. So I think that's really your opportunity, and I think it applies to everyone, because you get to pick your data sources, and then you give them to an AI, and then you start brainstorming with them.
Yeah, nice. Hamza?
Yeah, I love that. I think expectations, standards, they're all going to be evolving. They are currently evolving now with these tools at everyone's disposal. If I look back at my journey of somebody who is extremely passionate about, I would call it experimental drawing methods. Personally, I was fascinated by how we can communicate our design ideas in increasingly innovative ways. Because what I do recognize is that when people really resonate with an idea, if it's communicated to them in a powerful way. That's what led me into the world of AI. Do I consider myself an advocate for AI? If you're asking me to give them I don't know if I'm not like a team AI. I find myself on this particular path, and I can only share my honest opinions and kind of report on what's going on. And my aim is to be at the forefront, and I will try to stay and to be at the forefront so that I can give good knowledge back and and also see where things are going. Maybe I'm just extremely fearful and I just want to be right at the front so I can see what's going on. But I do have a very positive outlook. And I don't want to talk too much about AGI because it's some consider it in the realm of fiction, although it's increasingly looking like, you know, the theories do line up based on some of the knowledge and potential we're seeing. But even in a future where you might describe a dystopian, you know, scenario, humans will still be there. And I think we're stubborn creatures. I think we will always seek to find some sort of USP, some sort of unique value, because at the end of the day, all of this is being done for what? And for who? It's being done for humans. And I think our expectations on what we value, it has shifted throughout time and will continue to shift throughout time. And with AI embedded into this, sometimes AI might, who knows, maybe one day AI might be a devaluing, aspect to people's work. And we might move fully back to a craft-based, non-technological, value-based society. But ultimately, currently, we're looking down a path of how can we use AI to upskill and to already augment what we do as humans. And so I suppose the nugget I would leave is always be curious, maintain your curiosity, and trust that using AI tools is not giving up your human agency. It could actually expand it.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to close it off there, but fully open to any questions straight off the bat. Yes? All right. Hi.
Hello. So this has been fascinating, by the way, so thank you. Obviously, I want to talk about women in AI. So if the systems are learning from people who are inputting things into the system and the majority of the coders or the developers in the back end are men, how is that going to change our world in the future? Because AI has the potential to balance the world. And if there isn't enough women necessarily in AI, how is that going to happen? So just to throw out a question that's kind of been bubbling while I've been listening to you.
Yeah, question. It's a very interesting question. I mean, bias in data has always been a topic, a discussed topic, even before AI, even since we started working with data, even before technology was a thing, right? Like, if you have biased data, biased as in, as you say, not representative in a way or another, that will show in the answer and outcome of your model. Organizations are investing a lot of time to make sure that the samples that the models are trained on are as unbiased as possible, right? It is an ongoing effort. And on top of that, companies like Google also put some filters before and after you pose a question and you get an answer, right? So when you interact with Gemini, for example, you ask a question, but behind the scenes, the flow is like, is the question appropriate? Because if it's not, it will be rejected, even before it gets to the model itself. And the same for the output. So is the output appropriate? If it's not for any reason, it won't get exposed to the user. So on one hand, there's are you using data that are biased? If the models are trained on biased data, that will be reflected. But on top of that, it's on the individual organizations and companies that produce tools based on AI to also say, one thing is the data. We need to make sure we're training on the right data and unbiased and balanced data. But also we can put filters around it, right? Like, we don't have to expose the output as it is in a raw form, but we can put some guardrails around both inputs and outputs to make sure that the answers that we are getting, if they are biased because the data was biased for any reason, they won't get exposed. So there's this. In terms of coding, it's an interesting point. I mean, I personally don't think that women coders and men coders and other kinds of, I don't think that there's a difference in how we code per se. I think that that's a kind of input that it's generic by nature, and it could be produced by a woman or a man, and that won't change things as much. So that's for coding itself. But I mean, the point is that if the data is biased, the answer will be biased. And the two ways that we can work on it is, one, to make sure that the data is representative, but also two, there's a lot of guardrails that we can put, and we are all putting around inputs and outputs that these models have.
I think you're so right to bring up the problem of biases, and maybe I can't speak to the women's side of things as good, but what I can say is biases are really, they are front and center again of the considerations that we need to take, especially in the design and creative work that we do. Are we creating spaces that are inclusive? Are we including people even in the way we represent our images and the people in our images as inclusive? And we've seen already companies, again, I won't name them, but they've had to make massive changes in their direction to accommodate for true diverse input. And we've even seen companies kind of go a bit too far with, affecting the data and it giving positive biases. So really the key, I believe, is in human involvement, right? And I think ultimately everyone is going to have to increase their understanding of data in of itself. Data is really the driving foundational anchor of all of this. And what is it? And I think everyone will it will be more and more important to your job as time goes on, data, right? One really interesting example that we're seeing of something quite inspiring is what a community-based model looks like. And think of that this way, right? Like we go into an area in London where maybe you have underrepresented people, people from disenfranchised backgrounds. In the architecture and design process, when we do our community consultations, we want to seek their advice. We go and do a community engagement exercise. But what happens if we empower that community to actually give us the data by which we then design for that community? An simple example, and I speak very, high level here, is imagine that the community and every single person in that community, when they were brought together for a physical consultation, they actually contributed text and images. And then those text and images were used to create a fine-tuned model that then designers and stakeholders were using to generate and create, in a hybrid approach, using their hands, design solutions. That has created, to me, I think that's a very forward-thinking way to use generative AI in a way that's truly inclusive.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's kind of like grounding, back to what we were talking about, is grounding on the sample that you have at hand. So I agree with you, like if we could collect data from this room, then you would take your foundational model and ground it to us. And so you can do that in that way, even if the foundational model for any reason might not fully represent a specific target, let's say us, because we can collect the data and use it on the spot. So foundational model plus data about us, then all of a sudden you can also counteract any potential bias that comes from the foundational model by augmenting with data.
And this is the thing, while foundational model building might not be in the hands of lay people, you can make them involved in the fine-tuning of things.
Yeah, right, very nice. I'm going to say openly and honestly that there's too much information to probably walk away with. So we'll be sending out a little toolkit, a little starter's guide with some links, some programs, some terminology breakdowns off to you all. Please share them with whoever you feel you'd like to, just to get you started, just to make you more comfortable and expose you to that. I'm going to say that is it for today. I thank you for your time. I thank you both for your time. You're welcome to ask a few questions afterwards if you like. And thank you all for coming through today.